Eli Mercer was kneeling beside a humming air handler on the 42nd floor of the Bellwether building when a woman worth more money than he could imagine stepped out of her private bedroom and accidentally brought his dead childhood back to life. He had no business looking in her direction, and he wasn't trying to. The service door had been left open by a careless building porter, the bedroom door had failed to latch, and for no more than 2 seconds, the soft gray light from the dressing room fell across the woman's bare shoulder as she reached back to unzip a navy silk dress. That was all it took. 2 seconds. A crescent-shaped scar, pale and raised, running from the left shoulder blade down toward the middle of her back like a river turning through snow. Eli's wrench slipped from his hand and struck the marble floor with a sound so sharp it seemed to cut the whole penthouse in half. The woman froze behind the half-closed door. "Who's there?" she called, not frightened exactly, but with the hard edge of someone used to being obeyed. Eli snatched up the wrench with fingers that had gone suddenly clumsy. "Maintenance, ma'am," he answered, forcing his voice through a throat that felt packed with ash. "Sorry about that. I'm finishing the climate control repair. I'll be out of your way." He shut the panel, gathered his tools, and left with the work order unsigned in his pocket, his heart hammering so violently that he had to grip the service elevator rail all the way down. By the time he reached the parking garage, he was not thinking of the billionaire upstairs, or the polished lobby, or the security cameras tracking him as if a man in worn boots was naturally suspect. He was 12 years old again, barefoot on frozen dirt, watching flames swallow the little yellow house on Juniper Road, while his sister's name tore out of him until he had no voice left. For most of his adult life, Eli had been the kind of man people noticed only when something stopped working. At 43, he could read the sound of a bad compressor the way another man might read sheet music, could smell overheated wiring before an alarm found it, could coax one more summer out of an air conditioning unit that should have died 3 summers earlier. He worked for River City Mechanical, a practical company with dented vans, tired dispatchers, and a break-room coffee maker that produced something closer to punishment than coffee. He was not poor in the dramatic way people talked about on television. He had a roof, a job, a truck that started most mornings, and a daughter who still believed he could fix anything. But his life was built on narrow margins. Rent on the duplex in East Dayton ate half his paycheck. The old Chevy needed tires. His late wife's hospital bills had never fully disappeared, no matter how faithfully he mailed in small checks. His daughter, Nora, was 11 and growing too fast for last year's shoes, and every time she pretended not to care about something other girls had, it put a quiet bruise on him. Eli did not complain. He packed her lunch before sunrise, wrote notes on napkins when he remembered, dropped her at school in a truck with a heater that worked only on the highest setting, and then spent his days crawling through the hidden ribs of office towers, restaurants, clinics, and apartment complexes where people with clean hands and good shoes expected comfort to arrive without thinking about the men who made it possible. He was polite to security guards, patient with rude tenants, careful with invoices, and almost invisible everywhere except at home, where Nora still ran to the door when she heard his boots on the porch. His wife, Maribel, had been gone 4 years. She had taught 3rd grade, kept basil in coffee cans on the kitchen windowsill, and believed with fierce sincerity that people should be given more chances than they deserved. Cancer took her in 14 months, and the taking of her was not poetic. It was paperwork. Nausea, insurance appeals, motel rooms near treatment centers, whispered calculations at the kitchen table, and the awful discipline of smiling for Nora when the truth was sitting right there in the room. After Maribel died, Eli divided his heart into tasks because tasks could be survived. Pay the electric bill, learn to braid Nora's hair, meet with the school counselor, replace the washing machine belt, sign the permission slip, keep moving. In the top of his bedroom closet, behind winter blankets and a toolbox full of parts he might need one day, he kept a cigar box that had belonged to his father. Inside were the few objects Eli had saved from the first great loss of his life: a cracked photograph from a county picnic, a child's silver charm shaped like a tiny bird, a scorched page from a church directory, and a newspaper clipping so brittle he had to unfold it like a prayer. The headline said, "Juniper Road, Fire Kills 2, Young Girl Missing." In the photograph, Eli stood skinny and serious beside his parents, Wade and Tessa Mercer. Tessa held a little girl on her hip. The girl was 5, maybe almost 6, with thick dark hair cut unevenly because she had once taken scissors to it herself, and a smile that showed a missing front tooth. Her name was Laurel. Eli had been told she died in the fire. He had never believed it. Not when the firefighters stopped searching, not when social services closed the file, not when a county officer, kindly but exhausted, told him there were some things a boy had to accept. Eli accepted chores, hunger, second-hand clothes, foster homes, loneliness, and later the quiet ache of being a husband who could not save his wife. He never accepted that his sister had vanished from the earth just because the county had misplaced the truth. The fire had happened on a hard November night when frost silvered the weeds along the fence and Eli's father had left a space heater too close to a curtain in the back room. Though Eli never liked that official explanation because it made his father sound careless in a way he had not been. Eli remembered smoke before flame. He remembered coughing so hard his chest hurt. He remembered his mother yelling for him to crawl, not run. He remembered the hallway glowing orange and his father's hands shoving him through a broken window into the yard. Then there was cold grass under his knees, blood on his forearm, sirens far away, and his mother's voice no longer anywhere. Laurel slept in the little back bedroom with the moon stickers on the ceiling. Eli tried to go back for her. A firefighter caught him around the waist and held him while he fought like a wild thing. Later, grown-ups said the rear wall had collapsed. Later, they said no body could be recovered because the heat had been too intense and the rubble unsafe. Later, they stopped saying much at all. But Eli had seen, or thought he had seen, a figure beyond the smoke near the alley. A small shape in a nightgown. A neighbor insisted she had heard a child crying 2 blocks over. Another neighbor denied it. Records contradicted records. The one thing everyone agreed on was that Laurel was gone. Eli grew up with that word, gone, pressing into him. But gone was not the same as dead, and he knew the difference, the way a thirsty man knows the difference between rain and the sound of pipes in the wall. The woman in the Bellwether penthouse was named Vivian Hartwell. Even Eli, who did not follow business news, knew her name. Hartwell Meridian, the company she led, built logistics software used by hospitals, shipping firms, defense contractors, and half the companies downtown whose signs glowed above the skyline. She was 36, photographed in black suits and calm expressions, praised for discipline, feared for her memory, and described in newspaper profiles as a woman who had turned inherited privilege into independent power. Eli had seen her face on magazine covers in waiting rooms. He knew she had been adopted by a wealthy Cincinnati couple, because one of those profiles had mentioned it in a polished paragraph about resilience. He also knew from the accidental cruelty of public curiosity that she never discussed her birth family. None of that had mattered to him until he saw the scar. Laurel had been burned on her back when she was 3, before the fire, after tipping a kettle off the stove while their mother was making sweet tea for a church supper. Eli remembered the scream. He remembered his mother holding the child under cool water, his father driving too fast to the clinic, the doctor saying it would heal, but leave a mark. For 31 years, that mark had lived in Eli's mind with unbearable clarity. It was not merely a scar. It was a map. It curved under the left shoulder, narrowed near the spine, and ended in a small raised hook. Vivian Hartwell had that same river of scar tissue on her back. Maybe there were other scars like it. Maybe grief had made a fool of him. Maybe the human mind, starving for mercy, could turn any resemblance into proof. Eli repeated those sensible things to himself as he drove home through traffic, hands locked on the steering wheel, missing one turn, then another. But beneath reason, something older and quieter had already stood up inside him and said, "There she is." That night, Nora noticed something before Eli had even taken off his work jacket. She was at the kitchen table with math homework spread around her and a pencil tucked behind her ear the way Maribel used to tuck chalk behind hers. "Dad?" she said. "Are you sick?" He set his lunch cooler by the door and tried to smile. "Just tired, kiddo. You forgot to ask how fractions are ruining my life." "How are fractions ruining your life?" "Too late." The moment passed. She studied him with those serious brown eyes that made lying feel like stepping on glass. Nora knew grief not as an idea, but as a room she and her father had lived in together. She knew when he was pretending. Eli warmed leftover soup, helped her reduce improper fractions, listened while she described a girl at school who had mocked her thrift store backpack, and nodded in the right places. After she went to bed, he stood in the dark kitchen until the refrigerator clicked on and startled him. Then he took down the cigar box. The photograph looked smaller than he remembered. His mother's face, soft and tired and beautiful. His father's big hand on Eli's shoulder. Laurel laughing at something outside the frame. Eli set the silver bird charm beside the picture. It had been Laurel's, bought by their father from a pharmacy display 2 weeks before her 5th birthday. She had worn it everywhere until the clasp broke. Eli had found it under her bed the day before the fire and meant to give it back. He unfolded the clipping, then the old fire report, then copies of letters he had written to county offices, hospitals, adoption agencies, and missing children registries. Most had answered with regret. Some had not answered at all. Eli sat until nearly dawn with the papers spread in front of him, feeling the old search reopen not like a wound, but like a door swollen shut by years of weather finally shifting in its frame. He began carefully, because careful was the only way hope did not destroy a man. He did not tell Nora, not yet. He called in sick for the first time in 2 years and drove to the county records archive, a squat brick building that smelled of dust, toner, and institutional patience. The young clerk at the desk said disaster intake records from that year were incomplete and might require a formal request. Eli had heard those words before, in many forms, from many desks. He thanked her and asked whether anyone still knew the old filing system. That was how he met Alma Keene, retired but apparently impossible to remove from the building, a white-haired woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the alert impatience of someone who disliked lazy answers. She listened to Eli's story without sentiment, tapping one finger against a stack of folders. "Juniper Road," she said. 1995? 94, Eli said. November. Children's Services was a mess that winter. She led him past rows of metal shelves, muttering about reorganizations, water damage, and people who thought computers could fix records that had never been properly made. For 3 hours, they searched. Eli's back ached from bending over boxes. Dust gritted between his teeth. Then Alma found a thin intake sheet tucked inside a folder labeled "Only Temporary Ward Placements. Miscellaneous." The page described an unidentified female child, approximate age 5, admitted to Good Samaritan Hospital on November 18, 1994, with smoke exposure, shock, and a burn scar already healed across the back and left shoulder. Found wandering near the railroad underpass, 3 miles from Juniper Road, by a delivery driver who had taken her first to a fire station, transferred to emergency foster care pending identification. The name line was blank. The follow-up page was missing. Eli stared until the letters blurred. Alma, who had probably seen every version of human sorrow a public building can contain, did not touch him or offer comfort. She only said, "There may be a court number." A court number led to a courthouse in Lebanon, where an adoption petition had been sealed, then misindexed, then partly digitized under the wrong year. The file itself could not be opened without an order, but the docket showed enough to keep Eli awake for another week. An unidentified child from Montgomery County had been placed through a private agency called Bright Harbor Family Services in December of 1994. Bright Harbor had closed 12 years later after funding problems and administrative complaints. Its remaining records had gone, according to one state website, into storage. According to another, they had been transferred to a successor agency. According to a third, they had been incorporated into regional archives, which meant Eli knew that nobody wanted to look for them. He looked anyway. He went before work and after work. He used library computers while Nora sat beside him reading graphic novels. He called numbers that rang forever. He left messages for people who never called back. He wrote down every date, every name, every contradiction in a spiral notebook with River City Mechanical stamped on the cover. When Nora asked what he was doing, he said, "Old family stuff." She accepted that for about 2 days before saying, "Old family stuff makes you forget dinner's in the oven." He had burned the chicken to a blackened shell. They ate peanut butter sandwiches instead, and Nora, mercifully, did not tease him. That night, she came to his bedroom door while he was reading through printouts and said, "Is it about Mom?" Eli looked up. The hall light made her seem younger than 11. "No, baby." "Is it bad?" He hesitated, then told the smallest true thing. "I don't know yet." Nora nodded as if she understood that not knowing could be its own country. "Then I hope it turns good," she said, and went back to bed. The retired attorney's name was Rosalind Pike, and Eli found her through a bar association listing that had not been updated in years. She lived in a ranch house outside Miamisburg, with wind chimes on the porch and a yard full of brown hydrangeas. Eli expected to be turned away. Instead, Rosalind opened the door, looked at his work uniform, his tired eyes, and the folder under his arm, and said, "You're here about an old adoption." She made coffee too strong to drink quickly and read the documents at her kitchen table. Her hands were thin, blue-veined, steady. She would not break confidentiality. She said that 3 times. But after a long silence, she removed her glasses and pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. "There was a little girl," she said. "No reliable name, no family identified, private placement after emergency custody. I remember because the adoptive mother cried through the whole hearing. Not sadness, relief. She wanted that childlike breath." "Was the family Hartwell?" Eli asked. Rosalind looked toward the kitchen window, where a cardinal moved through the bare branches outside. "I can't answer that." "Did the child have a scar?" "Mr. Mercer." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I can't answer that either." He nodded, ashamed of how badly he wanted to beg. Rosalind closed the folder and slid it back to him. "What I can say is this. In those days, emergency cases could move too fast when people believed they were doing mercy. A child with trauma, no name she could clearly give, no one searching in the right file at the right time. Mistakes happened. Not always wicked mistakes, sometimes just human ones, stacked until they became a wall." Eli left with no proof, but something in Rosalind's face stayed with him. Not confirmation, not denial, recognition. Writing to Vivian Hartwell was harder than finding the records. Eli understood machines better than people with private security and attorneys. Machines did not suspect you of wanting money. Machines did not measure your worth by the lobby you came from. He drafted the letter 4 times at the kitchen table after Nora fell asleep. The first sounded too emotional. The second sounded like a lawsuit. The third was too long, wandering through 31 years of grief, like a man lost in his own house. The fourth was plain. He gave his name. He explained the Juniper Road fire. He described his missing sister, Laurel Mercer, age 5. He described the scar as he remembered it from childhood, then apologized for the circumstance under which he had seen hers. He listed the records he had found, the hospital intake, the transfer, the agency, the timing. He wrote that he was not asking for money, publicity, or anything except the chance to place the evidence before her. At the bottom, after staring at the blank space for nearly 10 minutes, he wrote, "If I am wrong, I will never contact you again. If I am right, then I have spent most of my life looking for you." He mailed it to Hartwell Meridian's headquarters and felt foolish the moment the envelope left his hand. Women like Vivian did not personally open letters from men like him. Somewhere an assistant would put it into a category: unstable, opportunist, nuisance. Days passed, then 2 weeks. Eli worked. He packed lunches. He fixed a boiler at a senior center, replaced a rooftop motor at a dentist's office, and spent Saturday under his truck changing a belt while Nora handed him tools and made theatrical gagging noises about the smell of grease. Life continued with its usual insistence, but under everything ran a wire of waiting that made him feel electrified and sick. The letter reached Vivian only because a security supervisor named Clive, who had known Eli from years of building service calls, remembered him as a quiet man who never lingered where he shouldn't and never padded an invoice. Eli had returned to the Bellwether building for a legitimate follow-up inspection after the climate system fault reappeared. He did the work cleanly, then asked Clive whether there was any way to confirm a personal letter had reached Ms. Hartwell. He asked once, without pressure. That restraint did more for him than desperation would have. Clive mentioned it to the building manager, who mentioned it to Vivian's executive assistant, and the letter rose through channels it was never meant to survive. Vivian read it late on a Thursday after a board call in which 2 men twice her age had spent 90 minutes trying to explain her own company to her. She stood alone in her office overlooking the river, heels kicked off, city lights trembling in the glass, and read Eli Mercer's careful handwriting without sitting down. At first she felt anger, not hot anger, but the cold kind that had protected her for years. People invented connections to power all the time. They wanted access, absolution, cash, meaning, proximity. She had learned to turn such things away before they touched her. But the scar stopped her. Not the mention of a scar. Enough people knew she had one, though not many had seen it. It was the shape, the placement, the small hook at the lower end, the detail about a burn before the fire, a kettle, a clinic. She read the letter again, slower. A memory stirred, not clear enough to trust. A woman's hands smelling of flour and soap. A boy saying, "Hold still, Laurel. It's almost clasped." A tiny silver bird flashing in morning light. Vivian set the letter down and backed away from it as if paper could burn. She had been raised as Vivian Hartwell, daughter of Conrad and Blythe Hartwell, who gave her piano lessons, orthodontia, private schools, summer camps she hated, and a standard of discipline that became the architecture of her life. They were not cruel people. Conrad had been restrained, formal, and quietly proud of her. Blythe had loved with anxious intensity, as if afraid Vivian might be taken back by whatever unknown world had produced her. They told her she had been adopted after a difficult early situation, and when she asked for details, they gave what they had: a closed agency, emergency custody, no known relatives, medical notations about smoke trauma, and a healed burn. Vivian had learned young that questions made Blythe cry and Conrad leave the room, so she stopped asking. She became excellent instead. Excellence was clean. Excellence did not wake screaming from dreams of orange light. Excellence did not flinch when alarms sounded or count exits in restaurants. Excellence did not wonder why the smell of wet wool and wood smoke could make her knees weaken. By 36, she had built a life so controlled that people mistook control for peace. Her penthouse held museum-quality furniture and almost no photographs. Her schedule was engineered to the minute. Her emotions, when they appeared, were escorted quickly off stage. Yet Eli Mercer's letter sat on her desk like an object from another gravity. She did not sleep that night. Near dawn, she opened a locked file cabinet in her study and removed the adoption folder Conrad had left her after Blythe's death. She had looked through it before and found nothing but gaps. Now the gaps seemed less empty than arranged around a missing center. Bright Harbor Family Services. Approximate age 5. Found after emergency incident. Burn scar, back and left shoulder. No known surviving relatives. Vivian pressed her hand against the old scar beneath her robe and, for the first time in years, allowed herself to wonder whether no known surviving relatives had ever meant no one was looking. She agreed to meet Eli in a conference room on the 6th floor of the Bellwether. Not her office, not her home, not anywhere that gave him too much or revealed too much of her. The room was bland by design, with frosted glass walls, a long maple table, and a pitcher of water neither of them touched. Eli arrived in clean work pants and a flannel shirt with the cuffs fraying. He had shaved badly, nicking his chin, and his boots had been scrubbed but not made new. Vivian noticed these details because noticing kept her from feeling. He carried a folder and an old cigar box. "Ms. Hartwell," he said, "thank you for seeing me." His voice had the rough courtesy of men who had spent a lifetime entering places where they were expected to fix something and leave. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer." He did. His hands rested flat on the table, scarred knuckles, a faint black line of grease still embedded near one thumbnail. Vivian had prepared questions the way she prepared for negotiations, but when he opened the folder, he did not argue. He simply told the story. Juniper Road, his parents, his sister, the fire, the search, the hospital intake, the misfiled placement, the retired lawyer who remembered but could not say. He spoke without drama, which made the story harder to dismiss. He did not ask her to believe him. He laid each fact down carefully, like tools arranged before a repair. When he finished, he opened the cigar box and placed a small silver charm on the table. A bird, tarnished, dark in the grooves, one wing bent slightly upward. "My dad bought this for Laurel before the fire," he said. "The clasp broke. I found it under her bed. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do." Vivian looked at the charm. Her chest tightened in a way that felt physical, almost medical. She saw, or imagined she saw, sunlight on a kitchen floor and a boy's tongue caught between his teeth as he tried to fix a chain too delicate for his hands. She did not reach for it. "Memory is unreliable," she said. It came out colder than she intended. Eli nodded. "Yes, ma'am. That's why I brought records. And if you're wrong, then I'm sorry." He looked down at the charm, not at her. "And I'll carry that too." The sentence unsettled her more than any plea could have. Vivian had built entire divisions by knowing when someone wanted something from her. Eli Mercer wanted something, certainly, but not what people usually wanted. He wanted the past to answer him. He wanted his dead to be less dead. He wanted a little girl in a photograph not to have vanished without witness. Those wants were dangerous because they were human. She told him her attorneys would review the matter and that there would be no further contact until she chose it. He accepted this without protest, carefully returned the charm to its box, and stood. At the door, he paused. "I have a daughter," he said, as though the words had surprised even him. "Her name's Nora. She doesn't know about this. I didn't want to put hope in her hands if I couldn't protect it." Vivian looked at him then. Really looked. Not the work shirt, not the tired posture, not the social category into which the world would have placed him, but the restraint. The cost of it. "That was wise," she said quietly. He gave a small nod and left. For several minutes after the door closed, Vivian remained standing beside the table, angry with him for coming, angry with herself for listening, angry with the small silver bird now absent from the room, yet somehow still shining in the air between them. Then she called her general counsel and said, "I need this investigated. Quietly. Completely. I want documents, not assumptions, and arrange a DNA test if the preliminary review supports it." Her counsel asked, "How urgent?" Vivian looked toward the frosted glass, beyond which assistants and analysts moved through their ordinary morning. 31 years urgent," she said. The investigation did not produce a villain, which disappointed some primitive part of Eli that wanted one. Villains were simpler. What emerged instead was a dull, devastating portrait of institutional failure. A child found disoriented after a fire had been admitted under no name because she could not reliably give one. The fire scene had been chaotic, the family presumed dead, the missing child presumed unrecoverable in the rubble. One county office searched hospitals under Laurel Mercer. Another recorded the unidentified child as Jane Doe, approximate age 5. The adoption agency received incomplete paperwork. A caseworker went on medical leave. A temporary placement became a permanent petition. Bright Harbor closed years later, leaving records boxed, moved, dampened, copied, and partially lost. No one had set out to steal Laurel. No one had set out to torture Eli. Yet the result had been the same. A brother grew up believing his sister was dead. A sister grew up without a name for the ache inside her. Conrad and Blythe Hartwell, long gone and unable to defend or explain themselves, appeared in the records as earnest prospective parents who had asked whether any relatives existed and been told no. Vivian read that part 3 times and cried for them first, which surprised her. Blythe, who had held her too tightly. Conrad, who had saved every school certificate in labeled folders. They had not stolen her from anyone. They had loved the child placed before them by a broken system and trusted the adults who said the past had been searched. Truth, Vivian realized, did not always arrive as accusation. Sometimes it arrived as grief with more rooms than expected. The DNA test was scheduled through a private lab in Columbus. Eli drove there on a rainy Tuesday morning after dropping Nora at school with $20 for a field trip he could not quite afford. He swabbed the inside of his cheek in a room that smelled of disinfectant and lemon cleaner, signed forms he read twice, and drove back to work, where his supervisor complained that he had missed the morning job assignment. Eli apologized and took the next call without explaining. The waiting that followed was worse than he expected. He had spent decades waiting in the broad, hopeless way a man waits for impossible news. This was different. This had a date on it, a portal login, a reference number. It had science and procedure, and a result being assembled somewhere by strangers in gloves. Nora caught him staring at his phone so often that she finally said, "Dad, are you secretly dating someone?" He laughed for the first time in days. "No." "Good, because you'd be terrible at texting." He looked at her across the table, at the sweep of dark hair falling into her face, at Maribel's stubborn chin living on in their daughter, and the desire to tell her, almost broke him. Instead, he said, "You'd tell me if I were acting strange, right?" Nora rolled her eyes. "You fix air conditioners and read appliance manuals for fun. Strange is kind of your brand." He carried that small mercy with him through the week. On Friday morning, Vivian's assistant called and asked whether he could come to Hartwell Meridian at 2 o'clock. No explanation, just the request, polished and professional. Eli was under a rooftop unit at a pharmacy, wind cutting through his jacket, when the call came. He sat back on his heels, closed his eyes, and said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll be there." Vivienne was already in the conference room when he arrived. She was not wearing her armor that day, or not all of it. No blazer, just a cream sweater and dark trousers, her hair pulled back loosely instead of perfectly. On the table lay a sealed envelope, though from the look on her face Eli knew it had been opened. He removed his cap without thinking. "Ms. Hartwell." "Vivian," she said. One word, but it changed the room. She pushed the paper toward him. Eli sat because his knees had become uncertain. The report was dense with clinical language, but the conclusion was clear enough for any man to understand. Probability of full sibling relationship, 99.99%. He read it once, then again, then a third time because his mind refused to hold the words. Full sibling. Full sibling. The room blurred at the edges. He pressed one hand over his mouth, not to hide emotion from Vivian, but to keep something inside him from breaking open too fast. "Laurel," he whispered. Vivian flinched, not away from the name, but toward it, as if some long-buried part of her had heard its own voice called from across a field. "I don't remember being her," she said. Her eyes were bright but guarded, still fighting for command. "Not clearly," Eli nodded, tears running silently into the lines beside his nose. "That's all right. Is it?" The question came out almost sharply. "Is it all right that you looked for a child and found someone who doesn't know how to be her?" Eli looked up then. He saw the fear beneath her composure, and because he was a father, because he had loved a grieving child through nights when no answer could make the hurt smaller, he knew what to say. "I didn't find a child," he said. "I found my sister alive. Whatever name you answer to, that's enough." Vivian turned away, one hand pressed against the back of a chair. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then she crossed the room with careful steps and stood beside him. She did not embrace him. Not yet. She placed her hand on his shoulder, light as a question. Eli covered it with his own rough hand, and 31 years of searching came to rest between them, without ceremony, without music, without anyone outside the room knowing that the world had just been remade. He told Nora that evening because truth that large could not be kept in a duplex with thin walls and a child who saw everything. He made spaghetti, forgot the garlic bread under the broiler, and finally sat across from her while smoke from the ruined bread drifted toward the ceiling. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. Nora put down her fork immediately. Children who have lost a mother do not take those words lightly. Eli reached for her hand. "It's not bad. It's big." He told her about Laurel in the way a child deserved to be told. Honestly, gently, without drowning her in adult sorrow. He showed her the photograph. He explained the fire, the lost records, the woman named Vivian. Nora listened with her lips parted, eyes moving from the little girl in the picture to her father's face. "So I have an aunt?" she asked. Eli laughed and cried at the same time, which embarrassed them both. "Looks that way." "Is she nice?" "I don't know yet. I think she's careful. I think—" Nora considered this with grave seriousness. "Careful is okay. Some people have reasons." The next Wednesday, Vivian came to dinner at the duplex. Eli spent 2 days cleaning, though there was only so much dignity a rented duplex with old linoleum and mismatched chairs could achieve. Nora made a welcome sign, then hid it because she decided it looked childish, then placed it back on the refrigerator 5 minutes before Vivian arrived. The black town car looked absurd at the curb. Vivian stepped out holding a bakery box and wearing jeans so new they seemed uncertain of themselves. She stood on the porch for one suspended moment, looking at the chipped paint, the brass doorbell, the pot of rosemary Maribel had planted years ago that refused to die. Eli opened the door. "Come in," he said. Vivian did, and Nora, abandoning all rehearsed coolness, blurted, "Are you really my aunt, or is science still deciding?" Vivian stared, then laughed. It was not the controlled laugh from interviews, but something startled and warm. "Science has been unusually clear," she said. Nora nodded. "Good. We made meatloaf. Becoming family was not like finding a missing object and putting it back where it belonged. It was awkward, tender, uneven work. Vivian did not know how to enter Eli's life without overwhelming it. Eli did not know how to accept anything from her without feeling bought. She offered to pay off his debts in one efficient sentence over coffee. He refused so quickly that the refusal wounded her. "I was trying to help," she said. "I know. Then why does it offend you?" "Because I've spent a long time standing on my own feet. And I've spent a long time solving problems with resources. I'm not a problem, Vivian." The silence after that was painful because both of them were right and both were wrong. Later, she apologized, not elegantly but sincerely. Later still, he let her set up a college fund for Nora, though only after she framed it as an aunt's privilege rather than rescue. Their Wednesday dinners became routine. Sometimes they met at a diner halfway between worlds, where Vivian learned that Eli put hot sauce on eggs, and Eli learned that Vivian hated being recognized, but was gracious when she was. Sometimes she came to the duplex and sat at the kitchen table while Nora did homework, and Eli replaced a faucet washer or mended a drawer. At first, Vivian watched domestic mess as if observing a foreign culture. School forms, grocery lists, old mail, Nora's sneakers in the hall, Eli's work shirts drying over the basement rail. Then, slowly, she began to belong to it. She brought flowers once and seemed alarmed when Nora hugged her. She brought a chessboard another time and discovered Eli was better than expected. She listened while he told stories about Wade and Tessa Mercer in careful portions, their mother singing Patsy Cline while folding laundry, their father carving wooden birds from scrap pine, Laurel refusing to sleep unless Eli checked the closet for bears, not monsters, because bears seemed more plausible to her. Vivienne took these memories like fragile objects passed across water. They visited Juniper Road in late winter when the sky was the color of tin and dirty snow clung to the curb. The house was gone, replaced by a small insurance office with tinted windows and a parking lot striped in yellow. Eli parked by the alley because that was where he had stood after the firefighters pulled him back. For a while, neither he nor Vivian got out. Nora had asked to come, but Eli had said no. Not this first time. Some grief belonged first to the people who had been there. Vivian sat with both hands folded in her lap, looking at a place she did not remember and yet somehow did. "I thought there would be something," she said. "There is," Eli answered. "Just not what we can point to." They stood in the cold near the edge of the lot while traffic hissed behind them. Eli showed her where the porch had been, where the maple tree had stood, where the back room collapsed. Vivian closed her eyes. A truck passed, rattling the street. Somewhere nearby, someone was burning leaves, and the smell cut through her so suddenly that she reached for Eli's arm. He steadied her without speaking. Later, she told him what little had come back. A red blanket, coughing, a man's voice that was not their father's telling her to keep walking, the hard shine of railroad tracks, the terrible conviction that if she said the wrong name, the fire would find her again. It was not a complete memory. It was a shard. Eli treated it as enough. Before they left, he placed his hand flat against the brick wall of the insurance office, not because it was sacred, but because it was there. Vivian did the same. Two grown people in a parking lot, touching a wall that had nothing to do with the home they lost, honoring what had survived because the exact place was no longer available. The world found out in a way neither of them wanted. A local reporter covering Hartwell Meridian's charitable giving noticed Vivian leaving a modest East Dayton diner with a man in a mechanic's jacket and a girl carrying a takeout box. A photograph appeared online with speculation dressed up as curiosity. Within days, business gossip sites had discovered Eli's name, his job, his neighborhood, Maribel's obituary, and fragments of the Juniper Road fire. Vivian's communications team wanted a statement polished to remove all vulnerability. Eli wanted no statement at all. Nora came home from school furious because someone had asked whether her aunt was rich, and whether Eli was going to quit working. The humiliation was not dramatic, but it was thorough. Men at job sites made jokes about Eli finding a billionaire sister like a lottery ticket. One client asked whether he still needed to be paid for service calls. Another watched him too closely around a jewelry case in a private apartment, as if poverty were contagious and opportunity a moral test. Eli kept his head down, did the work, and came home quieter each night. Vivian saw it and misunderstood his silence as regret. "I can make this stop," she said one evening. "You can make articles disappear. Some of them. That's not the same as making it stop. Then tell me what you need." He was tired, grease on his sleeve, shoulders bowed from a 12-hour day. "I need people to remember I was your brother before they knew your net worth." Vivian had no answer. The next morning, against her team's advice, she gave one interview to a serious newspaper. She did not dramatize the story or offer photographs of tears. She spoke of records, disaster separation, adoption gaps, and a brother who had searched for 3 decades with no audience and no reward. When the reporter asked what Eli did for a living, Vivian said, "He repairs what other people depend on and rarely notice. That seems to have been his character long before I knew him." Eli read that sentence in his truck outside a warehouse and had to sit for a while before starting the engine. Recognition changed some people and revealed others. At River City Mechanical, the owner, who had ignored Eli's requests for safer equipment for years, suddenly wanted him in company photographs. Eli declined. Danny, his closest friend at the shop, brought 2 coffees, set one on the workbench, and said, "So do I bow now, or is a curtsy more appropriate?" Eli laughed hard enough to loosen something in his chest. At Nora's school, the principal invited Vivian to speak at Career Day, and Vivian agreed only after Nora approved the idea with elaborate seriousness. She arrived without entourage, spoke less about success than preparation, and told the students that intelligence without kindness made people efficient but not wise. Nora watched from the second row, proud in spite of herself. Afterward, the girl who had mocked her backpack whispered, "Your aunt is scary." Nora whispered back, "Only if you deserve it." Yet the deeper change was quieter. Eli no longer opened the cigar box every month as if checking whether the past had vanished again. Vivian began keeping the picnic photograph on her office shelf beside pictures of Conrad and Blythe, refusing to choose one life over the other. On Laurel's birthday in April, though neither of them knew whether to call it Laurel's birthday or Vivian's, they ate lemon cake because Tessa Mercer had once made lemon cake from a boxed mix and called it sunshine food. Vivian took one bite and started crying without warning. Nora froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Eli simply slid a napkin across the table and said, "It sneaks up." Vivian nodded, embarrassed and relieved. Grief, she was learning, did not always lessen when truth arrived. Sometimes truth gave grief permission to become specific. By summer, Vivienne had turned her attention toward the system that had lost them. Eli recognized the look. He had seen it when she studied a chessboard, a legal brief, a malfunctioning thermostat at his house she had no ability to fix, but an intense desire to understand. She began with research, then meetings, then calls with archivists, child welfare attorneys, disaster response officials, and adult adoptee advocates who had been fighting record chaos long before a Heartwell cared to listen. "I don't want a vanity foundation," she told Eli. "I don't want my name on a gala banner while nothing useful happens." "Then don't build one. Help me build the opposite." So they did. It was called the Mercer Heartwell Search Fund, though Eli argued against his name until Nora told him, "Dad, being humble is not the same thing as being annoying." The fund focused on practical work, digitizing endangered adoption and emergency placement records, helping adults petition courts for sealed files, training disaster responders to cross-check unidentified minors with missing child reports, and covering DNA testing for families who could not afford another dead end. Vivienne supplied money, lawyers, systems, and authority. Eli supplied something just as necessary: knowledge of how ordinary people get defeated by forms, fees, shame, transportation, and offices that close at 4. In planning meetings full of polished professionals, he would listen for an hour and then say, "That won't work for a guy who can't miss a shift." Or, "You need a phone number answered by a person, not a portal." Or, "Don't ask for the whole story first. Some folks have carried it too long to hand it to a stranger all at once." People learned to stop underestimating him. Vivienne enjoyed watching the moment happen, the slight impatience when he first spoke, the recalculation when he made more sense than the consultants, the respect that followed. Eli never gloated. He wrote notes in his mechanic's handwriting and asked who needed coffee. The first reunification the fund helped complete happened in a church basement in Indiana, between a retired bus driver and the daughter who had been separated from him after a tornado when she was 3. Eli attended because Vivienne asked him to, though he stayed near the back, uncomfortable with ceremonies. The daughter was 52, the father 81. They approached each other slowly, as if moving too fast might shatter the years between them. When the woman said, "Daddy," in a voice that suddenly belonged to a child, Eli turned toward the wall and wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. Vivienne stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. She did not say anything. She had learned that some moments should not be improved with words. On the drive home, she asked, "Does it hurt every time?" Eli looked out at the highway, unspooling beneath the dusk. "Yes." "Then why keep doing it?" He thought about Nora asleep in the back seat after insisting on coming, her head tilted against a sweatshirt, mouth slightly open. He thought about the silver bird charm now hanging on a new chain in Vivienne's study, not worn but kept where light could find it. He thought about frozen grass, missing records, and a little girl who had walked through smoke into another life. "Because it hurts clean," he said finally. "Not like wondering. Wondering rots. Truth hurts, but it lets air in." Vivienne repeated that softly, as if filing it somewhere important. Truth lets air in. A year after the DNA test, Eli still lived in the duplex. He did let Vivienne replace the Chevy after its transmission failed on Mighty 75 with Nora in the passenger seat and semis roaring past too close for comfort. But he insisted on a used truck, not the luxury SUV she first suggested. He still worked for River City Mechanical 3 days a week, partly because he liked the work and partly because he refused to become a story about a poor man rescued by wealth. The other days he spent at the fund's modest office, reviewing intake calls, visiting courthouses, and sitting with people who arrived carrying folders that looked painfully like his own. Some were angry. Some were ashamed. Some expected to be dismissed and were startled when Eli offered coffee, pulled up a chair, and said, "Start where you can." Nora began spending Saturday mornings there, filing papers badly but charming everyone, and Vivian discovered she was defenseless against being called Aunt Viv by a child with a marker stain on her sleeve. Their family did not become simple. No real family does. Vivian still retreated when emotion crowded too close. Eli still mistook help for pity sometimes. Nora still missed her mother fiercely and occasionally resented this new branch of family for arriving when Maribel could not. But they learned. They made room. On Thanksgiving, Vivian hosted dinner in her penthouse, and Eli brought Maribel's sweet potato recipe in a foil-covered dish. Nora placed the old picnic photograph in the center of the table beside pictures of Conrad, Blythe, and Maribel. "There," she said. "Everybody's invited." No one argued. During grace, Eli looked around at the strange assembly of the living and the dead, the found and the lost, the rich table and the humble dish from his kitchen, and felt no need to explain any of it. The explanation was sitting right there, breathing. On the anniversary of the Juniper Road fire, Eli woke before dawn out of habit. For years, that date had been a private weather system moving through him, darkening everything it touched. He would take down the cigar box, read the clipping, hold the charm, and imagine all the ways a 5-year-old might have needed him while he failed to find her. This year, he made coffee and sat at the kitchen table while the duplex settled around him. The cigar box was there, but it no longer felt like a shrine to unanswered loss. It felt like a witness. He opened it anyway. The photograph, the clipping, the fire report, the letters. He touched each one with the care of a man acknowledging old companions after a long journey. His phone buzzed. A message from Vivian appeared on the screen. "Are you awake?" He smiled faintly and typed, "Always." A moment later she replied, "I'm outside." Eli opened the front door to find her on the porch in a wool coat, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and looking uncertain in a way the financial press would never have believed. "I didn't want to be alone today," she said. He stepped aside. "You're not." They sat in the kitchen until Nora shuffled in wearing mismatched socks and Maribel's old robe, accepted the extra coffee only to be told absolutely not, and made hot chocolate instead. Later, the 3 of them drove to Juniper Road. This time, Nora came. She stood between her father and her aunt in the parking lot of the insurance office, holding both their hands with the solemn authority of a child determined to anchor the adults she loved. Eli told her where the house had been. Vivian told her she remembered almost nothing, and that almost nothing could still matter. Nora listened, then placed a small painted stone near the edge of the lot. On it, she had written, "For the Mercers, who found each other." Eli could not speak for a while. That evening, back home, he set the cigar box on the top shelf of the closet, not hidden behind blankets this time, just placed there with care. The silver bird charm was not inside it anymore. Vivian had asked to keep it for a year, and Eli had said yes. In its place lay a new photograph taken at Thanksgiving. Eli with one arm around Nora, Vivian standing close on his other side, all 3 of them looking slightly uncomfortable and unmistakably happy. He stood in the bedroom doorway listening to Nora laugh at something Vivian had said in the kitchen. The sound moved through the house, warm and ordinary. That was the part that undid him most. Not the DNA report, not the headlines, not the public respect that had arrived too late to matter much, but the ordinariness. His sister asking where he kept the cinnamon, his daughter explaining a board game, a second mug left in the sink, a future making small noises in rooms that had once held only endurance. Eli had spent most of his life as the man who came when something broke. He had believed, without bitterness, that some things could be repaired and some could only be carried. He still believed that. His parents were gone. Maribel was gone. 31 years had not been restored to him like missing wages. No miracle had reached backward and made the boy on the frozen grass less alone. But truth had found its way through bad records, closed doors, pride, fear, and time. It had come through an open service door and a scar he had never forgotten. It had come quietly, without trumpets, wearing the face of a woman who thought she had no past and discovered she had a brother who had been keeping it safe for her. Eli turned off the bedroom light and went back to the kitchen, where Nora was laughing and Vivian was pretending not to cry over the painted stone now sitting on the windowsill. He did not announce himself. He simply stood there for a moment, unseen and grateful, then stepped into the warm light with the steady dignity of a man who had carried hope, until hope finally carried something back. When Eli Mercer finally uncovers the truth behind Vivian Hartwell, we're reminded that resilience and love can outlast even 3 decades of silence. His quiet perseverance, writing letters, digging through mislabeled records, and risking humiliation teaches us that some repairs go deeper than wrenches and wires. They mend the unseen fractures in a family and, in doing so, open space for hope to breathe. Vivian's decision to face her past, rather than hide behind boardroom glass, shows that strength isn't measured by net worth, but by the courage to admit we still need one another. Together they transform personal pain into the Mercer Hartwell Search Fund, proving that healing doesn't stop at our own doorstep. It ripples outward, giving countless other families a second chance at reunion. Their story challenges each of us to hold on when the path seems hopeless, to trust that truth, however delayed, has the power to reconnect broken lives. If this lesson moves you, drop a comment below, sharing a time perseverance paid off in your life. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us why compassion and tenacity matter. Let's keep this conversation and this community growing.